This video will be structured into sections containing each anti-domain technique, starting with New Shadow Style's simple domain, as this is the one we have seen the most. While I have decided to format it as such, the video should be consumed holistically, as parts from a certain section can recontextualize parts from another section. We will start with the New Shadow Style. Simple domain. This anti-domain technique has been created by Sadatsuna Ashia during the Heian era to protect his disciples from cursed spirits and curse users. To prevent this technique from falling into the hands of curse users, Sadatsuna made a binding vow that forbade his New Shadow Style students to teach it to outsiders. However, as time went by and new people were put in charge of the New Shadow Style school, the initial purpose of simple domain got lost and the new leader monopolized it. There were also new binding vows introduced, such as the students of the New Shadow Style needing to obey any call to action from the leader and the lifespan of them being siphoned by the leader. These made sorcerers reluctant to join the school, hence most sorcerers not knowing simple domain. Fortunately, Mimi killed the previous New Shadow Style leader, and Kusakabe succeeded them, rendering the binding vows null to make simple domain available to sorcerers. Simple domain works by creating a small empty domain around the user. This domain is able to interfere with the barrier of another domain, thus nullifying its sure hit. However, the simple domain would get destroyed after a certain amount of time. That time interval can vary from a few moments to a very long time depending on the difference in skill between the user and the opposing domain caster. To activate it, you need to lower your stance and reach for your sword, regardless if you actually do have a sword or not. There has seemingly been one exception to this, being Wee Wee standing upright and just performing the concentration hand sign, but this panel takes place a while after he activated the simple domain. It is highly likely that he had indeed crouched down as all the other users do, and then straightened himself to result in that shot. While it isn't confirmed, the activation stance most likely doubles as a ritual for boosting the output of the anti-domain technique. We know that depending on the skill of a sorcerer, there are conditions required to maintain simple domain active. Being skilled enough to perform simple domain without conditions means that adding conditions to it would become a ritual to boost its output. We know that this is a fact with Hollow Wicker Basket, and everybody maintaining the activation stance against Malevolent Shrine seems to support that idea. Those were all the details regarding its use as an anti-domain technique, but simple domain has other uses. Being a domain means that it slightly increases the output of the user while slightly decreasing that of the opponent. This has never been displayed as being a big factor, but it is significant enough to be stated. Besides that, the New Shadow Style incorporates sword techniques in the simple domain. The most significant one is Kusakabe's own creation, which allows him to automatically intercept anything that enters the domain. There is a subtle point about the simple domain's ability to stop sure hits that is not explicitly confirmed, so the last part of this section should be interpreted as a theory. Does simple domain stop the sure hit everywhere inside the opposing domain, or just inside the domain's range? We saw how Malevolent Shrine's sure hit was still active outside the simple domains, so the answer would seemingly be yes. However, open barrier domains function differently compared to closed barrier ones. We see this same question posed by Choso, to which Mimi explains that in a normal domain expansion clash, it is the barrier of the domains that clash, but we are left with the idea that something akin to a clash might still happen, with the literal sure hits being what is clashing. We find out that she was right because Sukuna explains how he had Megumi's soul take unlimited void's sure hit to shoulder the burden of adaptation. This implies that in each point of space the two sure hits were clashing, and in each point of space one of them could win. Sukuna was able to undo his own sure hit in the area of space that housed Megumi's soul, so unlimited void's sure hit was attacking that, but in the rest of the space inside unlimited void, the two were sure hits were nullifying each other. That is contrary to what happens in normal domain expansion clashes, where the barriers are clashing so the sure hit is nullified everywhere. From Tengen's explanation, we know that the first expanded domain always extends beyond the second one, meaning that if the sure hit wasn't nullified everywhere, the barrier of the second domain would be hit by the sure hit of the first. This is corroborated by Megumi's domain clash with Dagon, where Dagon's sure hit is stopped in the area that Megumi has his domain in, but also outside it. it has been made clear that regardless of how simple a domain is a domain, that means that if a domain expansion can stop the sure hit everywhere inside another closed barrier domain, so would a simple domain. Therefore, a simple domain would stop the sure everywhere if used inside a closed barrier domain and only inside its own range for an open barrier domain. The second anti-domain is hollow wicker basket. This anti-domain technique is the prototype of the new shadow style simple domain. Although in its first use it had the secret technique classification, in all of the following uses it no longer had this classification, so I assume it was a mistake. Because this is a technique from outside the new shadow style school, there are no binding vows restricting it. This has resulted in it being the go-to anti-domain technique for curse users. It is very similar to the new shadow style simple domain, so I will only state the differences. To activate it, you need to clasp your hands together, and this doubles as a ritual for boosting the output of the technique. It is worth mentioning that even though the output of the technique can be increased by maintaining the hand sign, this does not mean that it cannot get overwhelmed. Outside of its use as an anti-domain technique, it does not offer the same benefits as simple domain. It does not have any sword techniques incorporated in it, and it is unknown if it slightly increases the caster's output like simple domain does. This is probably why it is only the prototype. While it does not have all the benefits of new shadow style simple domain, the ritual for boosting its output can make it superior to simple domain if the user can fight effectively without the use of two of their hands, such as it is for Sukuna and Mahito. The third anti-domain technique is falling blossom emotion. This anti-domain technique has been passed down in the three great families. It is a secret technique because the three great families do not disclose it to outsiders, but there doesn't seem to be any binding vow restricting it like with the new shadow style simple domain. Its creator is unknown, but because all three great families have it, it is possible that it was at one time a relatively common technique that got lost in time outside the three great families who kept it in their records, similarly to how Sukuna's technique details got lost in time. Falling blossom emotion doesn't work by expanding its own domain to interfere with the barrier of a domain expansion. It instead shrouds the user in curse energy, which is programmed to automatically counterattacks the sure hit the moment it makes contact. Because it works by counterattacking the sure hit with curse energy, it only works against physical sure hits like malevolent shrines, and not against complex sure hits like unlimited voids. However, because it is a pure curse energy manipulation technique, it cannot get ripped apart by a domain like simple domain does. If the output difference is large, the sure hit will only be weakened, but if the difference isn't large, then the sure hit will be completely nullified. To activate it, it seems like you need to lower your stance and put your arms in front of you. Both Nyobito and Gojo have used it this way as an anti-domain technique, but Ogi has activated in a sword drawing stance similar to the one for new shadow style simple domain. It's either that the stance is only required for its use as an anti-domain technique, or it is not required at all and is only used as a ritual to boost its output. Similar to the new shadow style simple domain, falling blossom emotion can be used outside its scope as an anti-domain technique. The curse energy that shrouds the user during falling blossom emotion can be used to attack anything it comes into contact with, not just sure hits. The last anti-domain we have is domain amplification. Domain amplification has seemingly been created by Kenjaku to bypass Gojo's infinity, having taught it to Jogo and Hanami for the Shibuya plan and then to Sukuna for the Shinjuku showdown. While it has only been used to counteract curse techniques, the fanbook mentions that it can also neutralize sure hits. We have never seen this done or be explained in the story, so the next part will be a theory on how it can neutralize sure hits. I plan to make a separate video about domain amplification, and this video is already absurdly long, so I will only briefly talk about how it might be able to stop sure hits. The easiest answer would be that, because it is a domain, it would act identically to simple domain and domain expansions. However, Sukuna opted to hold on to Gojo to not be affected by unlimited voids sure hit, which to me would indicate that he didn't think that domain amplification would stop unlimited voids sure hit even for a few moments. Similarly, even though Jogo had domain amplification activated, he was still stunned as much as the others by the 0.2 seconds unlimited void in Shibuya. These aren't consistent with how simple domain works, so I have a different idea. Domain amplification doesn't nullify the sure hit by interfering with the barrier of the domain like simple domain or domain expansions do. It does so by absorbing it into the domain. This would be identical to how it nullifies innate curse techniques. If the output of the innate curse technique sure hit is lower than the output of the domain amplification, it would be nullified. Otherwise, it would only be reduced. This means that domain amplification would be similar to falling blossom emotion in practice, not being dispelled by the domain expansions, but also not completely stopping the sure hit. The reason why Sukuna didn't try it against Gojo or Yuta, and why it didn't protect Jogo at all against Unlimited Void, is because of the nature of the sure hits. Even if you manage to reduce the strength of Unlimited Void's sure hit, it would still overload you with information which would make you unable to do anything. This means that for the moment, the sure hit activates domain amplification would reduce its effect, but that reduced effect would incapacitate you, so the next moment domain amplification would be undone. Similarly, Jacob's ladder extinguished curse techniques so it would undo domain amplification. That means that for these type of sure hits, simple domain and hollow wicker basket are the only options to protect yourself. There are more things that could be said and theorized about, from what domains really are to how barriers work or how innate domains function, but I will end this video here. Perhaps JJK will reveal more about the inner workings of the power system in the far future, but for the near future, this is all the information there is to work with.